Hello everyone, and a huge welcome to today's event with Michael Tomlinson and Alexandra Purcell. I'm Justyna Matwiejczyk, and I'm a marketing manager at Cambridge University Press and Assessment, and I'll be your host for today's session. Before we start, just a few housekeeping points. If you have any questions for our lovely presenters during the session, please type them into the Q&A box, and we'll have time at the end of the session to answer hopefully as many as possible. The PowerPoint slides will not be shared, but this session is being recorded for you and will appear on the Cambridge University Press YouTube channel next week. And finally, at the end of this session, we will post in the chat box a link to a survey from which you can let us know your impressions of this event, but also download your certificate. So please stay with us to the end of today's session. And without further ado, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce today's speakers, Michael Tomlinson and Alexandra Purcell, who transport us today into an amazing world of children's bookshop for some pre-primary fun with early literacy and life skills. Michael Tomlinson is co-authors best-selling children's textbooks, and his books have sold in close to 100 countries around the world. He's also an English language teacher, presenter, and delivered sessions to close to 30,000 teachers on 4 continents. And Alexandra Purcell is a professional learning and development trainer for Cambridge University Press and Assessment based in Madrid, and is our in-house pre-primary expert. So over to you, Alex and Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you
Justyna.
so much. Oh, excuse me.
Thank you everyone for being here. Lovely to see so many people.
It is. It really is a pleasure to be here and see so many of you to be here with us today. So let's discover the world of Pippa and Pop.
Yo.
So what are we going to be looking at today? Well, we're going to first start off with setting the scene of the magical world of Dan and Kim's family bookshop. More info on that to come. And how the course helps develop a world of stories and play, early literacy development, and how Pippa and Pop really is the perfect start to an English learning adventure. But I think, would you agree, Michael, that the most important thing before we do get started is to introduce
Pippa and Pop. Well,
are Pippa and Pop. Have you got Pippa and Pop with you?
Pippa and Pop are these 2 adorable little mice. I mean, these are flashcards. They are, in real life, they're soft toys. But where they really come to life is in the imagination of a young girl called Kim. Kim lives with her brother Dan and their parents in a bookshop. And when she drifts off into her dream world, her world of imagination, it's inhabited by these adorable Pippa and Pop. And we see how they discover and find out about the world in which the young children live and develop. And we see how they develop in a parallel universe to the kids themselves. In a couple of lines, that's about it, I think.
Oh, I think it's marvellous. Yeah, I think it's really special, isn't it? The idea of the mice and the bookshop. And we'll be coming back to this later.
Yeah.
And if you do have any other questions, just pop them into the chat box or into the Q&A, and we will be dealing with them at the end of the session. So we're talking about a pre-primary course, and I think it's really important to just focus a little bit on how do very young children learn. So if we can just give it 30 seconds or so, what do very young children enjoy doing? Any ideas in the chat box? More than welcome. Yeah. Play.
Well, yes.
I think Lisa had already seen our presentation, Michael, because that is literally the next word on the presentation.
These people know what they're doing, don't they?
Exactly. So learning in a natural way.
Sensory activities, yes, as well, yeah.
Lots of games and songs. Well, we came up with these things, and we know that these are things that children enjoy doing, they love doing, and this is a way that they learn naturally by doing these types of activities. Yeah. And it's like they don't even know they're learning because they're enjoying themselves.
I think it's always important to differentiate the way that children see play than the way that adults often envisage play as something you do in your free time, as something that's a way of winding down, but it's actually the way that they experiment, they investigate, and all their learning comes out through this trial and error that goes on in play. And it works on so many different levels as well, doesn't it? There's the social level, the emotional level, the creative, imaginative level, and through these activities which we have on the screen, these are lots of ways of which we can get the most of those in the classroom.
Absolutely. And then also, as you've just mentioned, Michael, the other elements including things like exploration, opportunities for discovery, but above all, fun. That's what children want to do, and that's how they learn, and that's what we want them.
And it's very important to set the tone for that in the classroom, isn't it? That we know that kids, if they don't have the right atmosphere in a classroom, then they're never going to learn properly. There needs to be this safe but enjoyable atmosphere where they know they can have fun, they can make mistakes, and they can discover all these things through play and whatever else is being done.
Exactly, and especially because we're talking about learners of such a young age. You know, we're talking about 3, 4, 5-year-olds, so we need to take all of those things into account as well.
Indeed.
So, a couple of important questions that have come up, I guess, maybe more recently due to the pandemic and things like that. We've shifted our focus in teaching and learning, haven't we? So how can we now combine traditional and digital learning, and therefore how can we use visual aids to support learners? Michael, before we move on, would you want to add anything to this?
I think with everything, it's important to get the balance right, isn't it? I know that parents sometimes and teachers are wary of overdosing on the digital side of things, especially with very young learners, and I quite understand that. But it is something which children enjoy, and it is something which, if introduced carefully and correctly in the classroom, there's a lot of benefit which can be taken from it. So as long as we're making sure that whatever digital activity we're planning on doing is there for a purpose, that there's a sound rationale behind that, then I think there's a lot of benefit to be taken from, and we'll perhaps have a look at some of the kinds of activities we could do maybe.
Exactly. So as long as it's not just replacing a normal activity, is that what you're saying? So it needs it needs to have a value. It needs to be.
It's not just because the novelty value, is because it's doing something that a teacher in front of children isn't able to do in exactly the same way. Yes, exactly.
So it's kind of stepping up in that sense. So moving on to a couple of examples in that sense from Pippa and Pop, we're going to show you some examples from the routine boards. And these are available in a demo, which if you haven't seen them already, we'll be sharing them with you at the end of the session.
So this is from the online software that they can use with the books, right? Is it?
It is, and what I really like about it is that it's not all shown on one screen at the same time, but you can actually, from a teacher's point of view, you can click through step by step. So you've got a ready-made, introduction to your lesson to really lead your students into the lesson via this routine, starting off with...
What day is it today, Alex?
Oh, today is Thursday.
Still?
Is it?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Yes.
It is, isn't it? It all blurs into one, to be honest.
I nearly said Tuesday. And
Yes.
then moving on to the next slide, shall we say, happy birthday. So, Michael, it isn't your birthday today, is it? I haven't forgotten it, have I?
No, it isn't my birthday today, but it is my son's birthday tomorrow, if that helps.
Oh, okay. When's your birthday?
September, the end of September, the last day of September.
The last day of September.
The 30th, yeah.
So what star sign are you?
I'm Libra.
Oh.
Yes, particularly well balanced.
Mine's the first
believe
week of
any of that.
August, so...
And what's the weather like today in Madrid, Alex?
Let me just take a quick look out of the window. Fairly sunny, quite cold. So I'll go with sunny and cold, but spring is on the way.
Okay, yes. It's fairly similar here, to be honest. It was blue skies.
Yeah.
But it was cold this morning. Yes, fresh.
But this time of day, it kind of gets a bit nicer, doesn't it? So.
Yes.
And so what season is it? Okay.
It is still winter here, I think.
Just
Yes.
about spring though, right?
Yes, spring is around the corner.
It is just around the corner. And Michael, how are you feeling today? How are you?
Well, to be completely honest, I'm still a little bit ill. But I'm feeling better than I was yesterday, thank you. And I'm happy and excited to be here with you talking to all these wonderful people.
Oh, excellent.
And how are you?
Well, I'm just going to say I'm also happy to be here because it's an absolute pleasure. The only thing is I'm a little bit sad that we can't be doing this event face to face.
Oh, yeah, true. Yes.
Apart from that, I'm very happy to see all of you.
All those lovely people there, yes.
Yes, and it's a real pleasure to see so many of you from so many different countries as well. So please do keep all of your comments coming in the chat box too. Yeah,
I think I like the way here with the "How are you?" routine question, that we don't just go for the standard conventional "I'm fine, thank you," which kids tend to robot out. I mean, it's okay that they know how to do that for certain situations where they don't really want to open up, because that's what people do, isn't it? But I think we are opening a door to their emotional development and to being honest about how they feel, which I think is definitely the right direction to be going in. Do you not?
Oh, I would say absolutely. And we will be looking at another couple of examples about how Pippa and Pop helps develop these skills. But I think it's something essential and something which can definitely be developed, even if I think maybe a common perception is that if we're talking about very young learners, it's not possible, from the age of 3. But in fact, there are definitely ways that we can introduce emotional development and other life competencies. And we'll see ideas of how we can develop things like early literacy as well. I think it's really, really important. And
without it being too complicated, there are things that can be done, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
So moving on, and just to give you all an example, this is an example of a task from Pippa and Pop. And just to highlight the importance of short and clear instructions, which many of you may be familiar with, but just to point out things like look, listen, say, point, draw, trace. And the idea with these short, clear instructions is to not distract from the task in hand. It's to not distract from what we're actually asking the children to do, but make sure that the instructions are as clear as possible.
Make sure there's no white noise in the background, isn't it? Because if they hear lots of long sentences, they don't focus on exactly what just make it nice, short, precise instructions, indeed.
And because in so many of the tasks we've got values integrated, we'll see that in a while. I'm very excited about this. In the stories, we've got values, life skills integrated. It's really important that whatever instructions we give to the children are clear and as short and as concise as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we move on to talk a little bit about visuals, Michael?
Lovely. I do like a visual.
Marvellous. So let's have a little bit of a think about visuals and how we can integrate these into our pre-primary courses. So we've chosen this example, which I'm a huge fan of.
This comes from the opening spread in the book, is that right? Where they have an opportunity to look at it and start thinking about what they're going to see, yeah?
Yeah, what do you want to say anything about this, Michael? I think it's fantastic.
Well, this is, yeah, as you can see here, this is the bookshop. And there's Dan with his parents and lots of books. You can see it's an old-fashioned kind of bookshop. The inspiration being taken from the Cambridge University Press bookshop, which is in Cambridge, and it's on the site of a bookshop which has been open since, I think it's 1584. So the longest.
Wow.
Yeah. It hasn't always been CUP, but it's been there for all those years. It's a wonderful place. Well, we can talk about that more later as well.
Fantastic. Well, without further ado, we're now going to ask all of you, our marvellous audience, to be our students. So we'd like you to look at this image just for another minute or so. We've given you a couple of clues, but what would be fantastic is if now you could post into the chat box the things and the actions, the verbs that you can see happening in the picture.
Way.
Just wait for a couple of comments to come into the chat box. Fantastic. We've got another bit of a challenge for you coming up in the next 30 seconds. So, so I can see books, bookcase. The bookcase is interesting, and so are the stairs, aren't they? Michael, we were talking about this yesterday. It's this
spiral
kind
staircase.
of a spiral staircase.
Yeah. Looks like chocolate biscuits as well down the front, doesn't it?
And the tail. Yeah, absolutely.
It's that time of day.
Fantastic. You can see loads of ideas. So this is something that you could do with your students to get them just thinking about what they can see in the image and get them thinking about the vocabulary that they already know and also the verbs and the actions that they already know.
Yeah, I noticed somebody put pillows and cushions because it's a reading corner, isn't it? It's where the kids can sit down and read their books.
True. Yes.
Yeah.
And I like those verbs as well. Read, play, discover.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so next challenge, we're going to ask you to think of sentences, so going a little bit beyond the nouns and the verbs. What's happening in this picture? Can you give us sentences? And we'll give you a little bit more time for this. And I was going to say a minute, but I'll say a teacher's minute, so probably a little bit less. So any sentence that comes into your mind in relation to this picture. Very fast responses. Yeah.
Very good. There's some.
What's your favourite comment that's coming into the chat box, Michael?
The children are going to, well, I don't know. I don't know. I like them all.
I
the boy's
like
happy to be in the bookshop, I think. He is. I can't decide whether somebody said he's jumping. I can't decide whether he's jumping or singing, but he could be doing both, couldn't he?
I like the comment, there is a fish on the book. I'm going to go with that one.
Very nice. The little chap is jumping and he's happy. There you go. Perfect.
Fantastic. So again, it's a nice way of building up the language. So to start off by showing the students a visual and then asking them, first of all, to say what can they see in terms of nouns and then verbs. And then if they can, to give the sentences that they're able to give.
And it's something that works with all kinds of levels as well, isn't it?
I think so. And I think what's really important here is that students can give you what they're capable of giving. They don't necessarily need to produce a sentence of a certain structure.
That's right.
They can give you the language.
Mixed ability classes, isn't it? Yeah.
It does. Yeah. The language that they can remember, and then if they're able to give a sentence, then absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's a nice way of revising vocabulary. I've changed my mind. This is now my favourite one. The fish doesn't like the chocolate biscuits.
Nice.
Marvellous. Okay, should we move on and have a look at stories, Michael?
Let's.
Excellent. So, like I said earlier, I am very excited about this story.
Don't build it up too much.
Well, it does. It don't work, but just because it has a happy ending, so it'll all work out fine. So, what's the story called?
I think it's called Duck's Friend. Is that right?
It is indeed. So, here's an example of a story called Duck's Friend, and one suggestion that we've come up with is that you might like to show 2 images from the story before actually reading it. We're going to show you a video, and we also have options of the big books available. But one thing that you might like to do is show 2 images from the story and encourage students to say what they can see, vocabulary that they already know. And in the teaching material, we also have, as you can see in the bottom right hand corner there, you've got literacy development tips. So even at a very young age, you've got tips integrated into the course, going way beyond English language learning, but also helping them develop early literacy skills. And
I suppose, because this is right at the beginning of the book, isn't it?
It is.
Whilst we might be trying to ask the questions in English, if their answers come back in their own language in L1, then that's fine, isn't it?
I would say so. Yeah. Absolutely, because they're learning to express themselves, and it's not just about learning language, although clearly that's very important, but we are encouraging them to develop other skills at this stage of their learning.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the next stage, are you ready for this?
Come on then.
Should we listen to the story?
Please.
So let's enjoy for a couple of minutes. Could you just give me a thumbs up, Michael, if you can hear this okay? Fantastic.
Duck is sad.
Quack, quack,
Duck wants a friend.
quack.
Duck sees a fish.
Quack! Quack! Hello, fish! Play with me, please.
The fish goes away.
Quack! Quack!
Duck sees a frog.
Quack! Quack! Hello, frog! Play with me, please.
The frog goes away.
Quack! Quack!
Duck sees a goose.
Quack! Quack! Hello, goose! Play with me, please.
They play.
Quack!
Duck has got a friend. Duck is happy.
Quack!
That was quite emotional, wasn't it?
Did everybody enjoy the duck story? Just watching the comments coming into the chat box now. Yes.
Lots of smiles.
I think everyone's pleased that the story does have a happy ending, right?
Yeah. About being kind, yes.
It is. That's a really important point about the stories, isn't it, Michael? So it's not just about teaching English, as we mentioned before, but it's about integrating the values. And in this sense, it is about being kind and making friends. And there are lots of ways that we can check children's understanding. So just to give a couple of examples, you might ask children after you've listened to the story or read them the story, what they can remember in terms of what they saw or in terms of language. But I think this is fine to encourage them to express themselves in their first language as well. Would you agree, Michael?
Yeah, I think they can. At this stage, I think it would be very ambitious for them not to.
Yeah.
Encouraging, and if they have anything they can say in English, then that's wonderful. But even if it's just odd words, but yeah.
But things like how they felt about the story. You can always ask concept checking questions, you know, to check that they actually understood what was happening in the story. So things like, what did Duck want, and who was Duck's new friend, and what happened to Duck. And I think it's really important to praise the children for listening well,
Yeah.
for, being part of the story listening experience.
I think there's something you say there which is important, is that this whole thing about the story experience, because stories are very important for kids. Again, that's something we'll look at later, but it's important that we've got different ways of presenting it. They've seen the video. We have the book here where they've got an audio, which is another way they can look at it. We have a shiny big book thing here, which you probably can't see that well, but has
Marvelous.
lovely illustrations, with the idea that we can draw the children into the story and make them be participative in the process of reading, because with very young learners, stories should be dialogic, shouldn't it? That it's almost a question answer. So what's this? What can you see? Is this duck? Is duck happy? No, why not? So that they're drawn in, and by taking them through the big book, for example, we're starting to introduce them to what are the basic concepts of reading, going from the left to right, from the top to the bottom, and the characters and all of that. And using all these different ways of approaching it means that we have the opportunity to get the most out of the story. Because if a child likes a story, we all know that once isn't enough. They want it twice, 3 times, 4 times, but it's much more effective if you can use different media to be able to do that, I think.
Absolutely. I was going to say, you stopped at 5 times there. I was going to say 10 maybe. Like,
yes.
Can I hear it again? Can we watch it again?
Yes. Yeah.
So on that note, moving on to another really fundamental part of children's learning or enjoyment, or both at this age.
Yes.
We should move on to play, shouldn't we?
We should.
So I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment, because I'm going to ask you, Michael, if this is okay with you. Would you like to play a game?
Oh, I do enjoy playing a game. Can I? Please, miss, please.
So you can see here an example of some of the digital things available, and they're so marvelous, and the stories are available on here as well. So if we go into the game section, I think I'll leave this up to you, Michael. Which game would you like to play?
So much choice. Let's go with, how about Guess with Dan?
Guess with Dan? Okie dokie. Excellent. So we've gone into Guess with Dan. Now, we've got lots of different vocabulary items that I could choose from, but I think I'm just going to leave them all there.
Yeah.
Although, just so you all know, you can customize these games and reduce or increase the number of vocabulary items that you include in the games. But I'll just leave all of these here as they are. So put Michael to the test. And so this is our first example. So I've got the option of zooming out, but before I do, Michael, what do you think this is?
I can see tomato, and I can see something green.
Oh,
is it a salad?
Is it a salad? Not sure if it's a salad. Would you like a bit of a clue?
Oh, I think I can see some bread as well. Is it a sandwich?
Is it a sandwich?
Oh, yes.
Yes, it is.
Oh, some cheese as well, wasn't there? Cheese and
Well
salad.
done.
So there you go, gold star for you, and
Thank you.
a big well done from Pippa and Pop. Should we do one more?
Okay. Is it hair? Considering the units on food, it's unlikely, isn't it? But it does look like it could be hair.
And it's not a sandwich, because we just had that one. So
Yes. Is it some kind of fruit, maybe?
Maybe it is. Do you think it's an apple?
No, because apples are red or green, Alex. That's a silly answer.
Oh, good
It's
point.
yellow, so it could be bananas.
Oh, there we go.
Well done.
Smashing.
There we go. Marvellous. So what did you think of those games?
Very good, very exciting. I think kids will love them. And so will teachers, because it's very easy for teachers to stand back and play those games without being necessarily the center of attention. They also give the opportunity to pass over control to the kids a bit. You can either let them use the mouse, or depending on how old and how responsible they are, or they use the board pen, so that they're leading the play, which we know from research has great benefits. And
as we said before, it's learning through, excuse me, not just through play, but it's through enjoyment as well, isn't it? And it's something which can be done online or offline, or in a combination of the two. So as you say, it's something that children can do in the classroom if teachers do have access to an interactive whiteboard or something like that.
Yep.
Or it's something that they can do from home. And also that can be adapted to a face-to-face situation, I would say.
Yeah, I love them.
I think this point is really important as well. Don't know if you want to add anything here, Michael, but it gives children a chance to practice what they know, but also what they don't know, because it's an area and a time for experimentation, for testing things out. This is not just about learning individual words, but it's about, different skills. If it is in the classroom, about working with their classmates.
That's right. I mean, that social interaction part of playing plays such an important part, especially in the very young learner classroom. It's essential. That's why one of the main reasons why play, the introduction of play in games is so important for the young learners. Yeah,
absolutely. And well, as we've just said, it allows them to experiment. It's trial and error, whether that's in a digital context or whether it is face to face, and building new confidence and key life skills.
Yep.
So that brings us nicely on to our next point, which is exactly that. So language competency, which is obviously key.
We do that.
But also plus the key skills, the life skills that even very young children need at the moment, as they go forward throughout their education. And the key pillars integrated in this course are early literacy, which we've touched upon, guided play, so games with a purpose, learning through play, and helping them to develop key skills such as creativity, critical thinking, communication and collaboration, even though they're very young, I think.
To a certain extent, yeah.
Yeah. And then learning to learn activities. And we do have our Cambridge Life Competencies framework.
And even though, I mean, the Life Competency framework is wonderful, it goes right from the youngest ages up to adults. Even at this low level with these young children, where there are definite limitations as to how far you can take things, but it's great to have these facets underlying what we're doing. So there is a framework below it, and we can introduce some of these very gently. But obviously, I mean, the early literacy skills and the guided play, learning to learn, I think those are areas that every teacher wants to bring to their very young learner classroom, aren't they? Their preschool classroom.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's something which you're completely right, and it comes more into fruition when we start getting into primary levels and maybe higher. but just to start gently introducing it at pre-primary, there's nothing wrong with that, and it's perfectly possible.
Yeah.
And there are ways that we can do that. So our Cambridge, the life competencies framework, we actually have a set of cards, activity cards, which we'll be sharing with you at the end of the session or after the session. And they actually start from primary onwards. But there are things that we can do at pre-primary that just gently introduce very young learners to this type of thing.
Yeah.
So just to show you very briefly, we've got an activity from the activity book, and I'll just show you because I did this myself today. So there you go.
It looks like a cat, is it?
I think I did it quite well. What do you think,
did.
Michael?
Nice. That
More
looks
or
like,
less.
is that Tinks?
Yeah,
Pippa and Pop's friend.
joining up the dots, exactly.
Nice.
So that was fun.
Glad you had fun. Yeah.
And then just another little tip for you, regardless of what level you're teaching, I would say, you know, whether it's pre-primary or primary, to use this idea of traffic lights. To help learners feel more comfortable in what they're doing and to be able to signal to you as to how they feel towards each activity. So this suggestion is that you encourage learners to cut out little circles of coloured card, one red, one amber, one green, and that they put the card on their desk according to how they feel about the activity. So
you haven't done this one as well, have you?
Here's one I made earlier, Blue Peter style. Yeah.
Yes.
So let's imagine I was feeling a bit stressed about an activity in the classroom. I might show you my red card, or I might have that on my desk next to me, so my teacher would recognize that I'm not feeling happy about the activity.
Yep.
If I feel more or less okay, maybe, but I might need a little bit of help, then I might share this one. And if I'm ready to go and feel completely confident about the task and I don't need any help from the teacher,
it's all green.
Then it's all green, and I might show this one.
It's a nice, simple visual aid for teachers to see at one glance if they need to pay attention to anybody in particular, maybe now or maybe later, or if perhaps if there are a lot of alarm bells and red cards, they need to consider attacking it from a different angle. And also, if there are a lot of greens, then maybe it's another way for teachers to think, okay, we can adapt this, maybe move on quite quickly, up the challenge, etc. Okay, so a couple of examples just on that note, then developing life competencies, and this is quite similar. So you might ask learners to fill in little cards like this, so to highlight happy faces or sad faces or not quite sure faces. And you also have the option of little learn skills activities, which we'll make available to you after the session as well. These are not necessarily related to Pippa and Pop, but they do help develop life competencies. And as we've been mentioning, it's a combination of not just language, but also life skills as well. Yeah. And the importance of positive reinforcement and feedback. Yeah. So as we did really well in the games earlier on, well, you did, Michael. I've been practicing.
I'm really sorry that I didn't have any stickers for you.
But I did get, I saw this, I got a gold medal, and that was enough.
Okay, you got a gold medal, that's true. And now we are going to ask you some questions.
There's a special prize. Thank
Yeah.
you.
You're welcome. You ready?
I am. Fire away.
Okay, so the next section of this session, and this is an absolute pleasure, we're going to ask Michael a few questions. Keep the other questions that you've got coming into the chat box, but we just wanted to ask Michael a little bit more about what makes Pippa and Pop so special. I personally am a huge fan, and I could start talking myself about Pippa and Pop, but I will leave that over to you and move on to the first question. Why did you choose a bookshop for Pippa and Pop?
Well, on a personal level, both Caroline and myself, we both love books, and we've always loved bookshops and the feeling that bookshops have, the smell, and the fact that they're like a treasure, aren't they? You walk into them, there's something you want to read on every shelf. And in particular, as I mentioned, the bookshop in Cambridge is a wonderful place. But we also thought it would be a great place as a backdrop for a young learner or a very young learner's story or family, so that these young children and the mice in their adventures are always surrounded by books. We want to encourage the children in our books and the children who use our books to be doing as much reading as possible. And I think in these days, I mean, we spoke about the value of digital learning, but one of the downside is that they don't have the same physical contact with books, which is why I like the big book. And I think it's great that kids should be able to get into bookshops and feel and play and smell books. It's a real experience. So it was all part of that, that push towards getting children into a situation where they do as much reading as possible, encouraging reading as much as possibly we can, I think.
Fantastic. Okay, let's move on. I'm aware of the time, so the next question, can you tell us a little bit more about the characters, maybe?
Just a little bit. I don't want to give too much away. Pippa and Pop, as I said, mentioned these two young mice. Pop, the boy, is slightly younger than she is. He likes eating, as I do. And what we see is the way that they develop through the story, and they meet the house cat, who is called Tinks. As you can imagine, to start off with, they're not sure about the cats, but they become friends eventually. And then there's a family of four, Dan and Kim. Dan is the younger, Kim is slightly older, and their two parents. The two parents run the bookshop. And what we see is what they do on a daily basis. And from what surrounds those characters, we have little situations with which our students can learn a bit of English and learn more about life, is the story, I think.
Fantastic. Would you be able to tell us a little bit more about why the stories are so important in Pippa and Pop?
Well, we've hinted at this earlier, I think, that stories,
I think we have, yeah,
for young learners are...
I think, does everyone remember the duck story?
Stories are essential in a young learner course. Stories are essential for children. The way children interpret life is through the narrative, is through stories. If you think about when you talk to young children, when you try and explain something, you normally put it in a parallel story form, don't you? So to try and explain things to children, we do it through stories. So we have the stories which involve Pippa and Pop and the children. And then we also have these separate literature sections, which we saw Pippa and Pop introduce it on the video. They open the book, and what these mean that we can bring in lots of different things. Each one has different values. Obviously, there's different language as well. They're graded, but it's all there to encourage children to read eventually, not right from the beginning, and to tell the stories themselves if they get a chance. I don't know. I tell a story of my children before Pablo. We have two kids. Pablo's the elder, and I remember when his sister was very young, him sitting on a bed reading a book to her. So Pablo would probably been about 4 and a half. He actually couldn't read, but he had the book open, and he was inventing the story as he went along, because he'd heard it so many times before. And I think that's developing the oral skills is also going to reflect on how well they later learn to read. And that's the kind of enthusiasm, that spark that we're looking to inspire in young children, really.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that sounds completely amazing. I think you've summed this one up already, to be honest. Why is Pippa and Pop the perfect start to an English learning adventure? But I'd say with your last answer, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, well, I mean, what we really want is for the first contact that the young learners have with another language. It can be a little bit scary, can't it? You know, it's alien to them, possibly. So we want their first contact to be something which is enjoyable and successful, so that they'll want to continue carrying on learning the language and enjoying the language and having fun with it.
And to enjoy their experience, exactly.
Yes. And hopefully,
Fantastic.
long may that continue. And well, apart from that, not just for them, but also for their teacher, because the teacher has to do this day in, day out.
True that.
Yeah. Isn't it?
Okay. Fantastic. We're coming towards the end of the session. I don't know, Justina, have we got time for some questions?
Thank you, Alex and Michael, for this lovely session. Lots of really lovely comments and hearts and smiley faces in the chat box. It's really lovely to see everyone enjoyed themselves and found something new to learn. Yes, absolutely. There are questions, but I think I'm going to give you a moment to breathe, and I'll try and answer some of the questions myself.
Okay, go on.
I noticed in the chat box there were questions. Can I see other games? So obviously our audience enjoyed the games you showed, Alex, and I want to say that absolutely you can have a go at the other games and try them for yourself. They're at, you have to register at cambridge1.org. It's a very easy registration, and you search in the, you type into the search box Pippa and Pop demo, and you will find the games there. You can explore the materials. You can see the URL in the chat box. There are some other questions, actually very interesting, to do with the stories. For example, is it okay to use language like duck? What did duck do, or what did happen? So can you ask questions in the past when you talk with these very young children about stories?
I think if you're not focusing on the grammar point in itself, I mean, we're not, with these kids, we wouldn't be teaching them the past tense at this stage, but if you ask the question naturally and then elicit the answer as it comes, it doesn't need to be in the past tense, then it's acceptable. If you said what did duck, what does duck, they won't even notice the difference. It's a question of using it naturally. But yeah, I noticed that question myself. It's a good question, because I'm somebody who I try to pare down my language as a teacher to the minimum and only use language that children will understand. But when we're talking about a story at such a low level, there will be quite a lot of language they don't understand. So I think it's acceptable. And yeah, I think we can get away with that. What would you say on that, Alex?
Well, yeah, I was just going to add into that because in these particular stories, we're also dealing with values and things. It goes beyond language. So
Yeah.
I would say yes, and that, you know, maybe if it was necessary to use L1, then I wouldn't see a problem with that at all.
That's acceptable.
In my personal opinion.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, in the teacher's material, you've got suggested questions to ask after reading each story, and they come in a range of tenses. Because the idea is not just to limit the students to individual words. We want them to expand their language and also their knowledge and their skills. So I'd say the more exposure, the better.
And it helps add to the idea that the story is there because it's a story and not just because we're teaching blocks of language.
Exactly. Or lists of vocabulary.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I mean, we do have 2 minutes. I would like to propose that we give our audience a choice. Would you like to hear a song, or would you like to squeeze in another question?
Difficult choice, eh?
I should mention that Alex's
Antonia
singing
is
is
voting.
magnificent.
Yeah, I was just about to say.
Question. Oh, it's a difficult one.
Oh.
So let's maybe combine the two. Absolutely, there are songs in Pippa and Pop, and you can listen to some of them in that free demo, which I mentioned at cambridgeone.org. So you've got games there, you've got stories there, you've got songs there. So I hope you'll find the time to look it up. And final question.
I noticed a question about if there was text in the books.
Yes, I was just getting to that. Absolutely,
Yeah.
that's one I picked up.
Because
what if the students can't read and write yet? Was that the one?
I think it came about because as I showed the big book, on the big book, there is text. It has the story there written, which is, but that's the only place. Mm-hmm. There's no writing. Towards the end of the third book, it's slowly introduced, but initially there's none whatsoever. But it's in the big book for a series of reasons. One is it means that the teacher can read it. They don't have to memorize the story. But it's like the first steps of showing the children that this is what a story is, that the story does have words and the words are separate. And whilst they might not recognize them, they might start picking up on the idea that there's a relationship between the words that the teacher or the storyteller is telling and what they see on the page. So there's a specific reason for why they're in the big book. But it's noticeable that it's only in the big book and not in the course book, in the pupils.
Brilliant. Book. Thank you, Michael. I'm afraid that's all we have time for. Thank you so much to our lovely presenters for such an engaging session. Thank you everyone who joined us from around the world. Thank you for being such a lovely and participative audience. Don't forget to click on the link in the chat box to download your certificate. Yeah. And if you'd like to learn more about Pippa and Pop, in that link, you also have an option to click, I want to learn more about Pippa and Pop. Tell me more, and we'll get in touch with you. So thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Wonderful to see you, Michael and Alex.
And for listening.
And thank you for listening. And goodbye.
Thank you very much, everyone.
It's been lovely.